So you were probably expecting Anthropic to drop Claude 4 Sonnet any day now, but instead, they caught everyone off guard with the release of Claude 3.7 Sonnet. I don't think anyone's complaining though. This model is a significant step up from Claude 3.5 Sonnet and absolutely crushes other frontier models on benchmarks, as we'll see in a moment. It is the first hybrid reasoning model on the market, as they state here. Claude 3.7 Sonnet can produce near instant responses or extended step-by-step thinking that is made visible to the user. So it is both a reasoning model like OpenAI's O1 or O3 Mini or China's DeepSeek R1, and a traditional large language model like DeepSeek V3, GPT-4o, Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and so on. You might have also noticed in the announcement title that it mentions Claude 3.7 Sonnet and Claude Code. We'll dive deeper into Claude Code later, but here's a quick spoiler. It's a coding agent. In my last video, I was just talking about how we might see the first true software engineering AI agent this year, and then literally a day later, Anthropic drops Claude Code. So jumping right into the benchmarks here, we'll start off with the more traditional ones like the GPQA, the AMI, etc. And then we'll move on to the more reasoning heavy benchmarks, including the coding benchmarks, which I think are by far the most impressive. So they measured the performance of both Claude 3.7 Sonnet with no extended thinking and Claude 3.7 Sonnet with 64K tokens extended thinking. Basically, no extended thinking is the non-reasoning part of the model like a standard LLM, and 64K tokens extended thinking is a reasoning model that thought for 64,000 tokens before answering. Its chain of thought was 64K tokens long. Now, as you can see, the extended thinking version performs much better on all benchmarks. On the GPQA, which are PhD level science questions, it's on par with the recently released Grok 3 and slightly outperforms OpenAI's O1 and O3 Mini High. If we go to the bottom here, on the AMI and Math 500, both math benchmarks, its performance is nothing special. It slightly underperforms OpenAI's reasoning models and even scores worse than DeepSeek R1. To be fair though, Anthropic does mention in this announcement that in developing their reasoning models, they've optimized somewhat less for math and computer science competition problems, and instead shifted focus towards real-world tasks that better reflect how businesses actually use LLMs. But getting back to the benchmarks, it's clear that Claude 3.7's reasoning capabilities are state-of-the-art. And keep in mind, this is a hybrid model. Without extended thinking or without reasoning, you can look at this as essentially a slight upgrade over Claude 3.5 Sonnet. But, of course, the reasoning capabilities makes it a frontier model on all counts. In fact, Claude 3.7 Sonnet's reasoning capabilities might just be the best we've seen so far. On the SWE-Bench, a benchmark testing AI agents on their ability to complete complex real-world tasks with user and tool interactions, Claude 3.7 Sonnet scores 81.2% for retail sector tasks and 58.4% on airline-related tasks. These would be tasks involving things like online shopping through various websites or applications, booking a flight, scheduling a reservation, and so on. It is outperforming OpenAI's O1 model by a decent margin. Now, here is easily the craziest benchmark performance of this entire announcement. Claude 3.7 Sonnet scores 62.3% on the SWE-Bench verified, and 70.3% with custom scaffolding, meaning structured reasoning and problem-solving techniques like guided chains of thought. So this score is a massive increase from the previous state-of-the-art, which is OpenAI's O3 Mini High model at 49.3%. It honestly seemed like models were starting to plateau at around 49% on this benchmark, but clearly that isn't the case. By the way, if you aren't familiar with the SWE-Bench verified, it's a software engineering benchmark based on real-world GitHub software issues. It's probably one of the most legit coding benchmarks out there, and the pace at which models have been improving on it is honestly insane. You might recall that clip of Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei talking about the fast progress they've been making on this exact benchmark. I've definitely played it in one of my videos before. I remember he gave a prediction for when he thinks models will be at 90% on this benchmark, and at the time, back in November of 2024, it seemed very optimistic. Based on Claude 3.7 Sonnet's performance though, it doesn't seem so optimistic anymore. In fact, it feels like we are right on track. Check this out.
I think that's going to be one of the areas that changes fastest for two reasons. One, programming is a skill that's very close to the actual building of the AI. So the farther a skill is from the people who are building the AI, the longer it's going to take to get disrupted by the AI, right? Like, I truly believe that like AI will disrupt agriculture. Maybe it already has in some ways, but that's just very distant from the folks who are building AI. And so I think it's going to take longer. But programming is the bread and butter of, a large fraction of the employees who work at Anthropic and at the other companies. And so it's going to happen fast. The other reason it's going to happen fast is with programming, you close the loop. Both when you're training the model and when you're applying the model, the idea that the model can write the code means that the model can then run the code and then see the results and interpret it back. And so it really has an ability, unlike hardware, unlike biology, which we just discussed, the model has an ability to close the loop. And so I think those two things are going to lead to the model getting good at programming very fast. As I saw on, typical real world programming tasks, models have gone from 3% in January of this year to 50% in October of this year. So, we're on that S curve, right? Where it's going to start slowing down soon because you can only get to 100%. But I would guess that in another 10 months, we'll probably get pretty close. We'll be at least 90%.
So yeah, I mean, it looks like this benchmark will likely be saturated by the end of 2025. His prediction was 90% 10 months from now, which would be 10 months from November or October, depending on when the podcast episode was actually filmed. But that would put us at around July, August 2025. We went from 3% in January of 2024 to 49% in November to now 70% in February 2025. I really wouldn't be surprised if we see another 20% jump in the next 6 months. Now, let's talk about Claude Code. They state here, since June 2024, Sonnet has been the preferred model for developers worldwide. Today, we're empowering developers further by introducing Claude Code, our first agentic coding tool in a limited research preview. Claude Code is an active collaborator that can search and read code, edit files, write and run tests, commit and push code to GitHub, and use command line tools, keeping you in the loop at every step. So they've provided a video here where they demo Claude Code and have it perform some pretty complex coding tasks to show off what it's capable of. Honestly, if you don't plan on ever using this model for coding, you could probably skip the clip. But I still think it's worth watching. These agents are getting incredibly advanced, and understanding their capabilities is important even if coding isn't your main interest. So here's an example of Claude Code in action.
Should we be doing like big smile or?
No, big smile. That's
Okay.
creepy.
That's sort of what I'm Boris. I'm an engineer.
I'm Kat. I'm a product manager.
We love seeing what people build with Claude, especially with coding, and we want to make Claude better at coding for everyone. We built some tools, one of which we're sharing today. We're launching Claude Code as a research preview. Claude Code is an agentic coding tool that lets you work with Claude directly in your terminal. We're going to show you an example of it in action.
So we have a project here. It's a Next.js app. Let's open it up in an instance of Claude Code. Now that we've done this, Claude Code has access to all of the files in this repository. We don't know much about this codebase. It looks like an app for chatting with a customer support agent. Let's get Claude to help explain this codebase to us. Claude starts by reading the higher level files, and then it dives in deeper. Now it's going through all the components in the project. Cool. Here's its final analysis.
So say I was asked to replace this left sidebar with a chat history, and I'm also going to add a new chat button. I'm going to ask Claude to help me out here. We haven't specified any files or paths, and Claude's already finding the right files to update by itself. Claude can also show its thinking, and we can see how it's decided to tackle this problem. Claude's asking me if I want to accept these changes. I'll say yeah. Now Claude's updating the navbar, adding a button and icons as well. Next, it's updating the logic to ensure the saving state works correctly. After a bit, Claude completes the task. Here's a summary of what it's done. Let's take a look at the app. So we're seeing a new chat button and new chat history section on the left. Let's check if I can start a new chat while keeping the previous one saved. I'll try out the new chat button too. Great, it's all working.
Now let's ask Claude to add some tests to make sure that the features we just added work. Claude's asking for permission to run commands. We'll say yes. Claude is making some changes to run these tests. After getting the results, it continues with its plan until all tests pass. After a few minutes, it looks like we're good to go. Now I'm going to ask Claude to compile the app and see if we get any build errors. Let's see what it finds. Claude identified the build errors and is now fixing them. Then it tries to build again. It'll keep going until it works.
Now let's finish everything up by asking Claude to commit its changes and push them to GitHub. Claude creates a summary and a description of our changes. And it'll push the changes to GitHub. That's it. That's an example of what Claude Code can do. We can't wait for people to start building with it.
This is truly going to be a game changer for software engineers. As we know from Anthropic's recent economic index, where they compiled data on how their AI models are actually being used economically. In software development and technical writing tasks, over 1/3 of occupations, roughly 36%, see AI use in at least a quarter of their associated tasks, while approximately 4% of occupations use it across 3/4 of their associated tasks. Software engineering is already being heavily impacted by AI, more so than any other industry, and this is really just the beginning. Anthropic just released their coding agent, Claude Code, and OpenAI CEO Sam Altman talked about potentially launching a software engineering agent of their own by the end of 2025 in a recent interview. I'm sure most of the other big AI companies will follow suit in the months to come, which means we're entering into a new era with AI, the Agentic era. Now, here is a new graph that displays Anthropic's timeline for Claude's capabilities. In 2024, Claude assisted. It helped people get their work done and made them a better version of themselves. In 2025, this year, Claude will collaborate. It'll do hours of independent work for you on par with human experts, making you better than you ever could be alone. And 2 years from now, in 2027, they believe Claude will pioneer. It'll find breakthrough solutions for challenging problems that would have taken teams of people years to achieve. So I personally can't wait for Claude to pioneer. I mean, that is ultimately the hope for AI, right? That it can find unique and novel solutions to super challenging problems, especially ones that will benefit humanity tremendously, like curing diseases, advancing scientific research, transforming education, and so on. I'm also excited for this collaboration era though, or this agentic era, where we're gonna have teams of AI agents working together for us. Finally, Anthropic also posted this on X. A few researchers at Anthropic have, over the past year, had a part-time obsession with a peculiar problem. Can Claude play Pokémon? They mentioned that early attempts were poor. In June of last year, they tried with Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and it just kept trying to flee from mandatory battles. But here's the key part. Claude had never been explicitly trained to play Pokémon, nor any other video game for that matter. So this was truly a test to see if Claude could generalize to new environments and reason through a relatively simple game like Pokémon. I believe Pokémon Red specifically. In October of 2024, so a few months later, Claude 3.5 Sonnet showed some improvement and managed to beat a rival for the first time, moving beyond Pallet Town, the town you start in. Now, fast forward to just last week, the researchers decided to test out an early preview of Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and the results were astounding. Within hours, Claude defeated Brock. Days later, it trounced Misty, progress that older models had little hope of achieving. This was due to its extended thinking, or ability to reason, as we touched on earlier. These are gym leaders, by the way, for those who maybe aren't familiar with the game. For Claude 3.7 Sonnet to defeat these gym leaders, Brock and Misty, it would have also had to go through a ton of other battles beforehand, and traverse across towns in the game, which is pretty impressive. As they state here, where previous models wandered aimlessly or got stuck in loops, Claude 3.7 Sonnet plans ahead, remembers its objectives, and adapts when initial strategies fail. Critical skills for battling pixelated gym leaders, and we posit in solving real-world problems too. So it's kind of cool that Claude could play Pokémon, but this isn't really about Pokémon. It's about Claude's abilities to truly reason and generalize. This is literally a glimpse of AGI. So what makes this possible? Well, Claude was given a knowledge base to store notes, vision to see the screen, and function calls which allow it to simulate button presses and navigate the game. Together, they allow Claude to sustain gameplay with tens of thousands of interactions. So there's no funky stuff going on here. It's literally playing and perceiving the game fundamentally in the same way way a human would. OpenAI researcher Noam Brown, I think, said it best. He states, "There's a long history of AI doing well at games, but that's typically involved in the AI training on that game. What makes this result so cool and significant is that the model was never trained on Pokemon and yet still does well. That's really the main thing to take away here. This is truly a sign of generalization." Anyways, that is Anthropic's new AI model, Claude 3.7 Sonnet, and their new coding agent, Claude Code. If you made it to the end of the video, I really appreciate it. Let me know what your favorite part about this announcement was. Was it Claude playing Pokemon? Was it the coding agent, Claude Code, or something else? Let me know in the comments. Also, as always, if you want to stay up to date on future AI news just like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button.